Welcome to Restful Story Nights. In today's story, we gently drift back through the centuries to a time when the streets of London were narrow and cobbled, when the air carried the mingled scents of baking, bread, wood smoke, and less pleasantly, the occasional waft from a tanner's yard. We find ourselves in the year 1348. Waking in a city alive with trade, rumor, and the steady toll of church bells. This is a place where apprentices carry sacks of flour down bustling lanes, where markets overflow with bright bolts of cloth buckets of eels and the calls of merchants, who seem to believe that shouting louder might make their turnips taste better. It is a story told slowly in the unhurried rhythm of days long past, the pace of walking from the workshop to Cheapside, of pausing to watch a fiddler balance on a barrel, or of savouring a pigeon pie so hot it scalds your tongue. And though the shadow of history's great trials is never far away, there is humour here too. By and small comforts, and the quiet human moments that make life, whether in 1348 or today, worth pausing to notice. So settle in, let the candlelight flicker, and join us as we wander through medieval London, one careful cobblestoned step at a time. You don't remember how you got here. One moment you were asleep in your familiar bed, the hum of distant traffic outside your window, and the next you are awake, but not in the same world. The first thing you notice is the discomfort, the straw poking through the thin linen sheet beneath you, the roughness of the wool blanket that scratches against your skin, and the cold, the sharp, damp kind of cold that seeps into your bones and never quite lets go. It clings to the air like mist over the Thames. Slowly, you sit up. The room is dim, lit only by the faintest dawn light creeping in through ill-fitted wooden shutters. There's no glass, just narrow slats with cracks wide enough to allow in the sounds and smells of the street below. And what smells they are! Earthy, sour, smoky. The pungency of livestock dung, the stale stink of last night's chamber pot still unemptied in the corner. And beneath it all, the ever-present tanks of the river, the Thames, winding lazily through the heart of London, is no clear stream. In this year, the year 1348, it serves as a dumping ground for refuse and waste, a sluggish, dark ribbon of water that stinks in the morning air. A cock crows somewhere nearby, followed by the braying of a donkey and the shuffle of hooves on packed dirt. The city is already waking. Men shout greetings in thick accents. Carts creak over the uneven ground. And far off in the distance, the deep, solemn bells of St. Paul's ring the morning prime, the first prayer of the day. It must be around 6. You rub your eyes and try to make sense of where you are. The walls around you are timber and wattle, darkened with age and soot. There's no paint, no decoration, just raw wood beams and a thatched roof above your head. The thatch sags slightly, and you can see signs of old leaks, dark patches in the ceiling that tell of rains past. Your clothing is unfamiliar, a coarse linen shirt, long enough to reach your knees, with a simple rope belt. Your legs are bare, your feet colder still, toes pressing against a dirt floor sprinkled with rushes, dry. aromatic plants, laid down to mask smells and offer a little softness underfoot. These rushes haven't been changed in a while. Some are trodden flat, others still hold the faint scent of meadows from far beyond the city. You've woken up in medieval London, more precisely the year 1348, and as your thoughts begin to sharpen, you recall that date. Something about it sets a chill deeper than the cold floor ever could. This was the year the plague arrived. The Black Death, half the city, perhaps more, would be gone before the next few years ran their course. But right now, that's still ahead of you. Right now, it's just another morning in a city already groaning under the weight of life, trade, and poverty. You swing your legs down, feet pressing into the soft earth beneath you. The texture is strange, gritty, alive in a way that tiled floors or wooden boards never are. You stretch your arms above your head and feel every joint in your back protest. The straw mattress may be a luxury by some standards of the time, but compared to what you're used to, it's unforgiving. The room is small, barely more than a sleeping chamber. There's a three-legged stool by the shuttered window, a crude wooden chest pushed against the far wall, and a wash basin of beaten metal dulled with age. There's no mirror, no glass, no polished surfaces. In fact, there are no luxuries here at all. Just the bare necessities of life, assembled out of wood, iron, and effort. If you're fortunate, and it seems you might be, you found yourself in the home of a craftsman, perhaps a tanner or a cooper, or even a carpenter. These tradespeople lived above their shops, sleeping in the cramped rooms of the upper floors, while the lower level buzzed with the tools of their livelihood. That means you're not destitute. You have a roof over your head, 4 walls, and possibly a trade, even if you haven't quite figured out what it is yet. You stand slowly, joints still stiff, and make your way toward the shutter. With some effort, you pry it open. The chill wind of a London morning rushes in. It carries with it not just cold, but the scent of smoke, wood smoke mostly, from last night's hearths now being rekindled for the day's cooking and warmth. But beneath that, there's the deeper scent of the city, horse dung, human waste, ale, roasting meat, bread, and there's movement everywhere. Below you, the narrow street is already full of life. A woman in a woolen dress, her apron stained from yesterday's chores, throws a bucket of slop into the gutter. A boy herds geese with a stick, shouting to keep them from wandering. A man with a heavy beard and a bent back pushes a cart laden with firewood. There are no cars, no engines, no wheels turning on rubber, just the rhythm of hooves, the squeal of wooden wheels, and the constant shuffle of feet. You look up and down the lane. The buildings on either side of the street lean inward slightly, timber-framed homes with plaster infill, their overhanging upper stories almost touching at their highest point. The eaves are low, the gutters crude, and the roofs thatched or tiled in red clay. Chimneys puff thin trails of smoke into the morning air, rising like whispers above the rooftops. And the sky. The sky is grey, low, and heavy. It seems closer than you remember, as if even the heavens in this time are weighted with the burdens of the age. There's no electric glow, no planes streaking across the horizon, no distant hum of power, just the slow dawn, pressing forward inch by inch, illuminating a world of labor and survival. Your stomach growls. You pad across the room to where a small loaf sits, wrapped in cloth. It's coarse and dark, the crust thick and cracked. This is Maslin bread, a mix of wheat and rye, the kind eaten by the working class. It's dense, slightly sour, and satisfying, if a bit tough on the teeth. You tear off a chunk and chew slowly, your jaw working harder than it's used to. There's also a pewter mug beside the bread, half full of ale. Not the kind you know, not golden and bubbling, chilled and sharp. This is weak ale, flat and cloudy, brewed without hops, flavored instead with herbs like groot, a mix of yarrow, sweet gale, and other local plants. It's lukewarm now, but it tastes honest. There's something comforting in it. Children laugh outside, their games weaving between the cart tracks and puddles. You watch them for a moment. Their clothes are patched, their hands dirty, but their joy is real. And suddenly, you realize you're part of this now. Whatever brought you here, whatever twist of fate or time, you're not a spectator. You're in it. Pliss your bread, drink the last of the ale, and begin to think about what comes next. If you're to survive in this city, you'll need to find your place. And that means understanding the trade, the guilds, and the expectations of daily life. Every man and woman in London has a role to play, and the city is not kind to outsiders for long. A knock sounds at the door below, firm, rhythmic, someone calling for your attention. You don't know what awaits. Perhaps your master, if you're an apprentice, perhaps a neighbor, perhaps fate itself. But for now, all you can do is draw your cloak tighter around your shoulders. Take one last look at the strange, ancient world around you, and descend the stairs into the day ahead. The knock at the door below, if it can even be called a proper door, since it's really more of a crooked, splintery plank that does its best to stay upright in a warped frame, comes again, more insistent this time, as though whoever's on the other side is beginning to doubt your existence or your hearing. You hesitate, then begin your descent. The stairs creak loudly. In fact, they don't just creak. They complain, as if each step you place is a personal insult. You wonder vaguely if these timbers were ever solid, or if they've been protesting since the day they were nailed in. There's no banister, no railing, just a narrow, slightly tilting drop into the darkness of the floor below. You move slowly, carefully, one hand trailing along the wall, a wall with the curious texture of plaster, soot, and possibly centuries of hand grime, baked in like the crust on an old loaf of bread. At the bottom, you find yourself in a room that is part workshop, part kitchen, part everything else. There's no such thing as a designated space. In medieval homes, rooms are what you make of them, which is to say, usually small, slightly smoky, and filled with things that don't have a proper place. A small fire smoulders in the hearth, more smoke than flame, and hanging above it is an iron pot that may or may not contain something edible, depending on how brave you're feeling. Before you can investigate the mystery stew or the lineage of the cobweb in the corner, which looks old enough to have known the Norman conquest personally, you hear a voice. Up are you then, about time. The speaker is a man, his face weathered like leather left out in the sun, with a beard that's trying its best to disguise itself as a bird's nest. Peas wrapped in a tunic the color of dishwater, and wearing a pair of hose that have clearly seen better decades. This, you assume, is your master, or at least someone who thinks they own your mornings. Day's started already, he continues, tossing a glance over his shoulder as he bends to poke the hearth. Fire's near dead, and soul be the bread if we don't get to it. You've not come here to sleep all day, have you? You open your mouth to reply, only to realize that you're not entirely sure what you're meant to say. You don't even know what trade this man practices, and you're not sure he does either, judging by the strange assortment of objects scattered about. There's a half-finished barrel, some nails, a bucket of what looks like lye, and what may very well be a dead squirrel drying on a string. Maybe he's a cooper, or a tanner, or a general-purpose medieval eccentric. Either way, he gestures at the door with a flick of his hand. Out with you. Go fetch water. And mind you don't drop the bucket like last time. You find a wooden bucket by the threshold, its handle worn smooth by many hands, and step out into the morning street. The city is truly alive now. It bustles, if such a word can apply to an age where bustle means feet, carts, hooves, and shouting. The noise is a great heaving tapestry. Market cries, clanging bells, the occasional clatter of something valuable being dropped, and followed by a string of expletives that probably haven't changed much in 700 years. You make your way down the lane, careful not to step into anything you'll regret, though that's easier said than done in a city without plumbing, garbage collection, or any real sense of what sanitation might mean. There are people everywhere, women sweeping their thresholds with brooms made from bound twigs, children darting between legs with the practiced recklessness of the city-born and traders already, setting up shop with rough cloth stalls and precariously balanced goods. You pass a baker, his stall already steaming with fresh bread. The smell is heavenly, warm, yeasty, a little smoky. It almost makes you forget that the water you're about to collect is from a public conduit, one of the city's many communal water sources, which is thankfully better than scooping directly from the Thames, though not by much. The conduit is a simple stone basin fed by lead pipes that wind unseen beneath the streets, bringing water from nearby springs or wells. The queue is short this morning. Just a few people, mostly women, with large hips and larger baskets, muttering to one another about the rising cost of grain and the mysterious death of old Walter, the tanner's dog. You fill your bucket, careful not to splash too much on your feet, though your feet are already so dusty that water might actually help. On your way back, you pass a man selling eels from a cart. He's loud, enthusiastic, and somehow managing to make live eels sound like the most appetizing option imaginable for breakfast. Fresh from the Thames, slippery, wriggly, and ready for the pan. Who wants to break their fast with a bit of squirm? You decline. The master greets your return with a grunt, and you set the bucket down by the door. He eyes you with a squint. Did you spit in it? You blink, surprised. He shrugs. Everyone does. Helps keep the devils out. You nod slowly, unsure whether that's superstition or sarcasm. In this era, it's often both. He returns to his work, which, today, seems to involve mending a harness with some very blunt tools and a lot of unnecessary swearing. He gestures for you to sweep the floor, which you do with a kind of earnest futility. No matter how much you sweep, the dirt remains. It is, after all, a dirt floor. You suspect medieval sweeping is more about the gesture than the result. After a while, you resent back upstairs with instructions to mind the pot. The same pot that still contains an ambiguous stew of yesterday's leavings. You poke it cautiously with a wooden spoon. There's definitely cabbage, maybe a bit of pork, something green and wilted that could be either a herb or a warning. You stir it slowly, watching steam rise from the surface in lazy tendrils. You wonder how many meals have been made in this very pot over this very fire. How many hands have stirred it before you? How many mouths it has fed? This is life, you realize. Not the dramatic, sweeping kind that fills history books, but the slow, grinding, oddly satisfying kind that fills bellies and wears out shoes. And it's not without its humor, either. The neighbor from next door, a squat woman with arms like tree trunks and a voice that could strip paint, bursts in without knocking. She scolds your master about a missing chicken, apparently last seen fluttering suspiciously near his yard, and threatens him with the wrath of St. Mildred if it turns up in his stew. He grins, says nothing, and offers her a bowl. By mid-morning, the street is louder still. A drummer passes, calling citizens to witness a proclamation from the mayor's men. Something about new curfews and plague precautions, though the word plague is still spoken carefully, as if saying it too boldly might invite it in. Children mimic the drummer as he walks away, slapping their palms on the sides of buckets and chanting nonsense. You help with errands. You learn to carry more than you thought possible. You're sent to buy salt, then lime, then rushes, and every vendor you meet has something to say about the weather, or the bishop, or the price of oats, and you're starting to feel like you belong here in some strange, dreamlike way. By midday, your arms are tired, your feet sore, and your nose acclimated. You're learning to breathe through your mouth when the gutters run high. You're even learning to enjoy the rhythm of the place, the measured pace, the tactile world of hands and wood and fire, the neighborly arguments that resolve with laughter and bread. You return to the house, where the master finally reveals his trade. He's a leather worker, or was, before his eyesight began to fade. Now he teaches apprentices and does light repairs, harnesses, belts, sheaths. You're expected to learn quickly. You're handed a strip of dried hide, a small knife, and a needle so thick it could double as a tent peg. Don't bleed on it. he says, half joking. Blood weakens the stitch. You work by the light of the window, threading coarse sinew through holes you've pierced yourself, fingers fumbling, shoulders hunched, the smell of leather strong in your nose. It's oddly satisfying, the tangible feel of creation, the knowledge that something is being made with your own two hands. Later, as dusk falls, the city softens. Shadows stretch across the lane. The cries of merchants fade, replaced by the occasional song or the jangle of a lute. Smoke curls from the chimneys. Doors close. Torches are lit. The day winds down. You sit beside the hearth with your master, who chews bread with a sort of determined resignation. The stew is warm, surprisingly flavorful. He talks of old wars, of frost fairs held on the frozen Thames, of a tooth he lost to a spoiled fish pie in '36. You listen, tired but content. The world outside is quieter now. The smells have shifted. More wood smoke, less dung. The stars begin to peek through the grey veil of London's sky. Somewhere nearby, a church bell tolls Compline, the last service before sleep. And as you lie back on your scratchy wool blanket, the straw poking again in familiar places, you think, just for a moment, that maybe this strange world isn't so terrible after all. Rough, yes, dirty, undoubtedly, but full of life. And if you're clever, quiet, and just lucky enough, you might even survive it. You wake before dawn. There is, as always, no alarm clock, no polite chime or vibration on a smart device. Instead, it's the quiet that wakes you, the stillness before the stirrings of morning life begin. And then, one by one, the familiar sounds drift in. The distant creak of a cart's axle, the soft cluck of chickens below the floorboards, and that muffled cough from the neighbor next door. A cough that sounds like it's been lodged in his chest since the reign of King Edward I. You sit up. The straw mattress groans in protest. Your back isn't exactly grateful either, and your neck feels like it was used as a hinge in someone's workshop. You try to stretch, but there isn't enough room to raise your arms without brushing the sloped ceiling. So you give up halfway and settle for rolling your shoulders with a grimace. At your feet, the chamber pot awaits. You regard it with the kind of ambivalent politeness usually reserved for co-workers you barely know. Necessary, but not something you want to interact with before breakfast. Still, it beats going outside in the dark. You manage your business with the care of someone defusing a bomb, then slide the pot carefully back under the bed, resolving once again that someday, somehow, you will find a better system. But for now, this is 1348, and your plumbing situation is as medieval as your mattress. Downstairs, the hearth is out again, to fire like your enthusiasm died in the night. You fumble for flint and steel, which is much harder than it looks in historical dramas, where fires seem to spring to life with one noble spark. And after several attempts, you manage to catch a flame in the tinderbox. It takes effort, patience, and more muttered curses than your master would approve of. But eventually the fire responds, crackling to life and spreading warmth into the chill of the kitchen. You stoke it with dry twigs and a bit of old rushes. watching the embers glow and curl as the light rises slowly through the cracks in the shutters. Outside, London is stretching its limbs again. You pour a ladle of thin ale from the jug by the hearth, breakfast beverage of champions, and nibble on a bit of yesterday's bread. It's gone hard at the edges, like all medieval bread does within hours, and requires the kind of jaw strength normally associated with oxen or knights in tournaments. Still, it fills your belly, and the ale softens the crust enough to chew without sacrificing a tooth. The house stirs. Your master descends the stairs with the careful gait of someone who knows exactly where each creaking board lives, and how to avoid the one that bites. He eyes the lit hearth with vague approval. Fire-lit pot warming. Look at you, he mutters, scratching his beard. You might just be worth keeping around. It's the closest thing to a compliment you've received since waking in this century. You offer him a mug of ale, and he takes it with a grunt. Neither of you says much. Speech is still something reserved for later in the day, when your bones are warm and your thoughts have stopped sticking together like cold porridge. After breakfast, the day truly begins. You're sent into the city to fetch flour. Now, this is not a matter of popping over to the nearest Tesco and choosing between bread flour, cake flour, almond flour, and that one overpriced gluten-free brand. No, this is a task, a whole morning affair. You make your way toward the baker's quarter, past rows of crooked houses and open ditches that do their best to pretend they read drainage systems, but are, in fact, more like decorative mud traps with aspirations. The city smells worse in the early hours. You hadn't thought it possible, but here it is. The combined perfume of refuse, fish, unwashed humanity, and horse droppings, all intensified by the still, damp air. Along the way, you pass the church of St. Mary-le-Bow, its tower just beginning to catch the morning light. The bells toll the hour, deep, measured, and undeniably comforting. It's a rhythm that structures the day, and you find yourself grateful for it. If nothing else, the bells remind you that time still moves, even here. The baker's quarter is already bustling. The smell here is better. Flour, dust, hot yeast, the occasional whiff of ash and sweat. You watch bakers hauling trays of misshapen loaves into huge stone ovens, men and women moving with practiced urgency. These are not your delicate patisserie artisans. These are Flower Street, soot-faced bakers who lift 100-pound baskets and shout orders through clouds of heat and smoke. You're waved toward a younger apprentice who eyes you warily, then nods once. Master says no white this week, only Maslin. You want a full stone. You nod, though you have no idea what a stone of flour looks like, or how you'll carry it back. You assume it's manageable, because otherwise, surely someone would have mentioned it. Reader, it is not manageable. A stone of flour, 14 pounds, is more than enough to make you regret every decision that brought you to this moment. You hoist it onto your back with the awkward grace of someone attempting medieval CrossFit, and begin the long trudge home. On the way, you pass a fishmonger, arguing loudly with a man about the difference between fresh caught and caught yesterday, but still twitching. You pass a priest scolding a boy for spitting too close to the church wall. You pass a woman with an entire goose stuffed under one arm, muttering about her in-laws. This city is alive, really alive, in all the messy, noisy, chaotic ways that modern life has carefully smoothed over and silenced. There's no insulation here, no buffers between you and the realness of things. The smells, the sounds, the sweat and toil. It's all immediate, all pressing, all now. You arrive back red-faced, winded, and slightly fatalisted. Your master grins. Didn't drop it, did you? You shake your head. Then you're doing better than the last one. You don't ask what happened to the last one. The rest of the day is spent in the workshop, where you help with the preparation of a new saddle. Leather is soaked, cut, shaped. You learn to use an awl and begin to understand why medieval hands were always so rough. Every tool is simple, but it demands skill. There are no shortcuts, just repetition, judgment, and patience. At one point, your master burns himself on a bit of heated iron, curses inventively, then declares that such things build character. You don't argue. You just hand him a cloth and wonder, not for the first time, whether this life is a punishment or a lesson. The afternoon drifts slowly into evening. There is no rush hour, no blaring horns or traffic jams, just a gradual winding down. Carts return from market. Animals are penned, doors are bolted, lamps are lit, tallow candles, mostly, though they sputter and smoke like annoyed spirits. Dinner is the stew again, refreshed with a bit of barley and some mystery greens. It tastes better tonight. Maybe you're getting used to it. Maybe you're just too hungry to care. Afterward, you sit by the hearth, while your master sharpens tools and tells a story about a cooper who tried to pass off a cracked barrel as new and ended up with his reputation and possibly his kneecaps broken. Outside, the bells of Compline ring out again. The streets grow quiet. You step to the doorway, lean on the frame, and look out. The city is still, cloaked in mist and shadow. Somewhere a dog barks once. Somewhere else, someone sings a low tune in a language you don't recognize. And there you are, standing on the threshold of a world that no longer exists. And yet, here it is, under your feet, around your shoulders, soaking into your clothes, and your thoughts like smoke into fabric. You're tired, but it's a good tired, the kind that comes from living, not just existing. You climb the creaking stairs, settle again on the lumpy mattress, and pull the scratchy wool blanket up over your shoulders. The city breathes below you, and you, strangely enough, breathe with it. Morning arrives again, not with a start, not with a jolt, but with that same quiet insistence that it always does in this century, where time slips into your room like a stray cat, silent and patient, until it's suddenly sitting on your chest. You stir under the heavy wool blanket, now faintly familiar in its scratchiness, and rub the sleep from your eyes. The air is cold. Again, the fire is out. Again, the straw mattress has mysteriously rearranged itself in the night. forming new and experimental lumps that no mortal spine was ever meant to endure. But you're used to it now. Well, used to is a strong phrase. Let's say you're becoming less surprised by the daily discomforts of 14th century life. You sit up, stretch your arms with care not to hit the sloped ceiling, and glance toward the window. The shutters are slightly ajar, letting in a sliver of grayish light and a chilly breeze that smells faintly of wet wool, smoke, and onions. Below, the street is already murmuring with life. It's market day. Your master is up before you. You know this because he's already shouting something down the stairwell in your general direction. You can't quite make out the words, but the tone suggests that if you don't get moving soon, there may be fewer breakfast options and significantly more sweeping in your near future. You pull on your rough tunic, now patched with yesterday's work stains, and your hose, which have taken on the permanent texture of dried parchment. Your shoes, thin leather things barely thicker than a pair of ambitious socks, are still damp from yesterday. You slip them on with a resigned sigh and descend the stairs. The hearth is alive again, and your master, chewing on something that resembles jerky but smells more like disappointment, looks up at you and gestures toward a satchel on the table. We'll need salt, beans, onions, if they're cheap, and maybe a rabbit if you can haggle it down, he says, his voice half muffled by his breakfast. Oh, and none of that bruised stuff like last time. I'm not paying for air and peel. You opened your mouth to protest. The bruised onion incident was not entirely your fault, and frankly, that venter had a suspiciously heavy thumb. But your master is already waving you off. Go, before the best's gone. With your satchel slung over one shoulder and your stomach grumbling with the quiet dignity of someone expecting very little from the morning, you step out into the street, and London on market day is something to behold. The entire street has transformed. Stalls have been erected, not the neatly arranged, weatherproof booths of modern farmers' markets, but rickety wooden tables held together by determination, twine, and some sort of barter-based magic. Bright fabrics hang from ropes, drying herbs sway in the breeze. Chickens cluck indignantly from wicker cages, and the mingled scent of humanity and livestock is somehow both overwhelming and familiar now. You make your way toward the main square, dodging puddles and occasional children with wooden hoops, who treat the crowded streets as a personal racecourse. The mud is thicker here, not just rainwater, but that special medieval mix of soil, straw, horse dung, and whatever liquid ran out of the butcher's stall the night before. Your shoes make unpleasant squelching noises as you go, and you try not to think about the temperature of the liquid that just seeped in through the side seam. You find the salt vendor first, an older woman with a face like a dry apple and hands that look as though they could crack walnuts just by looking at them. She eyes you with suspicion. Back again, are you? She says, scooping a measure into a small cloth pouch. You still owe me a farthing from last week. You blink. I don't think that was me. She squints harder. Oh, maybe not. All you apprentices look the same, pale and nervous. No offense. None taken, you say, handing her the coin. She sniffs it as if testing for counterfeit, then nods once and turns her attention to the next customer. Next stop, beans. You find a barrel of them. Broad beans, large and pale green, tended by a gangly man with a nose that might once been broken, and a demeanor that suggests he is not above selling you rocks if you not paying attention. You weigh them carefully in your hands, eyeing the scales, which seem just slightly unbalanced in his favor. You want him or not, he grunts. They're clean, no worms mostly. You nod. He scoops a few handfuls into your satchel with the precision of someone who's been cheating customers since birth, and you move on. Onions are easier. You find a cart piled high with them, white, yellow, red, in all stages of firmness. You pick 3 solid ones, check for soft spots, and pay quickly, before the vendor can upsell you on pickled eggs or suspiciously damp cheese. Then comes the most complicated part, the rabbit. We find a boy, maybe 10 years old, holding a pair of live rabbits by their ears, looking entirely too pleased with himself. Fresh caught, he says brightly. Only 1 penny each. No fleas. Swear on St. George. What if I don't want to kill it myself? You ask, somewhat sheepishly. The boy shrugs. For another penny, I'll do it for you. Another half, I'll skin it too. But you have to clean the insides. You pause, remembering that your culinary skills begin and end at don't burn the stew. He waits patiently. You hand over to pennies. He grins, whistles, and vanishes behind a curtain. A few moments later, he returns with a neatly skinned and very dead rabbit wrapped in cloth. You place it gently in your satchel and thank him. He nods solemnly, then immediately starts shouting, "Fresh caught," again to a nearby nun who looks deeply unimpressed. Your bag is heavier now, and your arms ache as you wind your way back home. But there's something satisfying about the clink of coins, the rustle of herbs, the quiet jangle of rabbit bones wrapped in linen. You've become, somehow, a part of this great clattering city. Not just a visitor, but a participant, a cog in the vast machine of bread and barter. Back at the house, your master inspects the goods like a royal treasurer. He holds up an onion, sniffs it, nods, squeezes the rabbit, grunts, tastes a bean raw, chews it thoughtfully. Passable, he says, which, in his language, is high praise. The rest of the afternoon is spent preparing supper. The rabbit is stewed, slowly, with onions, beans, and a bit of yesterday's ale, and the scent fills the small house with something warm and savory. For once, you eat in near silence, not because there's nothing to say, but because the food is actually good enough to make conversation feel unnecessary. After the meal, your master sits by the fire and pulls out a worn deck of cards. Not quite like modern cards, but close enough. The illustrations are hand-painted, though faded with time. He deals them out with the sly grin of someone who is almost certainly about to cheat. You play for scraps, bread crusts, an extra sip of ale, and the right to avoid the chamber pot duties in the morning. Use spectacularly. Night falls, and the city goes quiet once more. You step out into the cool air, watching the faint glow of candles through shuttered windows, listening to the last cries of street hawkers fading into the distance. The stars peek out between patches of cloud, and the moon, waning now, casts a silvery light over the rooftops. You stand for a moment in the doorway, breathing in the scent of wood smoke and rabbit stew, and think about how strange it is that this place, this time, has begun to feel less like a nightmare and more like a peculiar kind of home. Tomorrow will bring more errands, more dirt, more chamber pots. But tonight you have a full belly, a roof overhead, and the knowledge that, against all odds, you're surviving 1348 one market day at a time. And really, in a year like this one, that's saying something. The day begins differently, not with your master barking orders or your stomach growling at the memory of food, but with quiet, a gentler kind of quiet, the type that blankets a city in reverence rather than sleep. The street outside isn't silent, but its usual clamor has softened, as though the city has collectively agreed to use its indoor voice for the morning. You stretch slowly under your no-familiar wool blanket, careful not to disturb the nest of straw that somehow still manages to poke your ribs despite your best efforts to flatten it each night. The usual morning draft curls around your ankles as you rise, a polite reminder that you re-still in a building with more gaps than walls, and that glass windows are a luxury reserved for the saints and possibly the very rich. You dress in your standard attire, tunic, hose, shoes that barely qualify as footwear. You smell faintly of stew and soot, but honestly, so does everyone else. It's London. It's 1348. You're doing fine. Downstairs, the fire is already going. Your master sits near the hearth, nursing a cup of warm ale, staring into the embers like they owe him money. He doesn't speak at first, just nods toward the table, where your portion of bread and cheese waits. Small, simple, and blessedly not moving. A luxury breakfast by medieval standards. Then, without looking at you, he says, "Sunday." You pause mid-chew, and that means no work. He scratches his beard. Well, less work. Church first. Then you can loaf about, but loaf properly. Mind. None of that restless fidgeting. You finish your bread slowly, letting his words settle in. A day off, or at least a day mostly off. You'd read about the Sabbath before, of course, a weekly day of rest, sacred in theory, and occasionally even in practice, depending on one's station, trade, or personal definition of rest. Your master stands with a groan, adjusts his belt, and grabs a hooded cloak from the peg near the door. "Come along," he says. "The bells'll be ringing soon. If we're late, we get the bad benches, the ones with the wormholes and splinters." This is, as it turns out, a powerful motivator. Pews step out into the cool morning air together. The sky is soft with mist, the kind that doesn't quite turn to rain, but still manages to settle in your hair and cloak like a damp secret. The city has dressed for the Sabbath, too. People move more slowly, more neatly. Aprons are cleaner, cloaks less patched. children actually combed. The usual chaos has been replaced with a kind of hushed expectation. The bells begin to toll just as you reach the church, a deep, echoing sound that seems to come from inside your chest as much as from the tower. You're not near St. Paul's today, but at a smaller parish church nestled between crooked houses and the bones of old Roman walls. Its stones are worn smooth by centuries of wind, rain, and hands. There, Esmos, in the cracks and ivy curling up the side like nature, is trying to reclaim it, leaf by stubborn leaf. Inside, the pews are rough-hewn and uneven. You do, in fact, get one of the better benches. Solid wood with only minor splinters and a reasonably horizontal seat. The air inside the church is cool and slightly smoky from the incense. Candles flicker along the stone walls, their flames tiny against the vast, vaulted silence. The service begins in Latin, which you don't understand, and goes on for quite some time, which you absolutely do understand. Your master mutters along in places, half from memory, half from habit, while you mostly sit quietly and try to look suitably penitent. There are moments of song, moments of stillness, and the occasional cry from an infant who has no interest in being reverent. You find yourself drifting, not out of boredom exactly, but because the rhythm of the service, the soft rise, the voice, the smell of voices, the smell of wax and wood and old prayer books, creates a kind of meditative trance. You look around at the other worshippers, some worn, some wide-eyed, some clearly here more for appearances than faith. Everyone dressed in their best, which, for most, simply means the tunic with fewer holes, or the cloak that hasn't been mended this week. The priest, a tall man with sunken eyes and a voice that somehow manages to be both gentle and commanding, speaks of suffering, humility, and the importance of neighborly love. You find yourself listening more closely than you expected. There's something deeply grounding about this place, this ritual, something that reminds you of times passing, not as a threat, but as a comfort. The world moves forward, slowly, always, even here. After the service, the churchyard becomes a kind of impromptu gathering space. Families chat. Vendors hover at the edges, hawking roasted chestnuts and ribbons, blessed by questionable saints. Children play tag among the gravestones, while their mothers scold them half-heartedly. Your master chats with a cooper about barrel prices. You, meanwhile, wander a little. A woman selling hot pottage catches your eye. A thick, steaming bowl of barley, onions, and mystery meat, served in a chipped clay bowl with a piece of stale bread. You part with a coin and find a spot on a stone wall to eat. It's actually quite good, though you're pretty sure one of the chunks might be rabbit, or pigeon, or possibly squirrel. The rest of the day is unstructured, something you're slowly learning how to appreciate. Your master takes his nap, stretched out on the bench near the hearth, with his hat pulled over his eyes. You sweep the floor out of sheer habit, though it doesn't stay clean for long. You thumb through a scrap of parchment covered in badly written prayers. Someone's attempt at literacy, perhaps abandoned halfway through. You try your hand at a few stitches in the corner of a leather pouch. You drink a little more ale, and eventually you go for a walk. The city on a Sunday afternoon feels different, quieter, more thoughtful. There are fewer carts, fewer cries. Even the animals seem to respect the day. The geese quieter, the horses plodding instead of trotting. You pass the Guildhall, its shadow long against the street. Men stand in small groups, muttering about trade and tithes. A few apprentices play dice in the alley until a watchman claps his staff and sends them scattering. You find yourself wandering along the river, where the banks are muddy and the water moves sluggishly under a pale sky. The Thames is wide here, full of boats, some for trade, some for fishing, some just floating in place like they've forgotten where they were going. The smell is strong, but even that feels softened by the cool breeze. You sit for a while, watching the ripples move, listening to the creak of rope and wood, the distant cries of gulls. And you think, not in any grand philosophical way, but in the slow, circling way that comes with being still in a place that never is. You think about how different life is here, how much harder, how much more direct, but also how much more vivid. Every sound, every flavor, every person you meet carries a weight, a texture, a kind of presentness that your modern world had somehow dulled. Here, you live moment to moment, meal to meal, flame to flame. You don't know how long you'll stay here, in this curious pocket of time. You don't know if or when you'll ever go back to warm showers, smooth pavement, or Wi-Fi. But for now, you rise, brush the mud from your knees, and head back home as the sun begins to set and the bells of Vespers begin to ring. And though your shoes are still damp, and your cloak still smells faintly of onion, and your belly is once again beginning to growl, you find yourself smiling, because today you did very little, and somehow it felt like enough. You wake the next morning to a sound you haven't heard before, a peculiar scuffling, like someone trying to quietly shuffle an armful of brooms across a stone floor. For a moment you wonder if it's a dream, some odd fragment of noise that wandered in from the depths of your imagination. But then you open your eyes and realize, with a strange mix of curiosity and dread, that it's not a dream. It's very real. And it's coming from the corner of the room. There, near the hearth, sits a creature, a cat, or, at least, you think it's a cat. It has all the classic elements, the tail, the ears, the casual air of contempt, but it also has the lean, weathered look of something that's seen things, possibly fought them, possibly won. It regards you with that ancient feline expression, one that seems to say, "You are barely tolerable, but I'm willing to coexist for now." You blink, it blinks, you nod politely, it sneezes. Your master appears behind you, carrying a wooden bucket full of kindling. "Ah, you've met Blanche," he says, dropping the wood with a clatter. "Don't let the name fool you. She bite a monk if he looks at her wrong." The cat stretches, revealing claws that could probably rend parchment or small rodents with equal ease. then pads out the door as if she owns the entire street. Which, come to think of it, she might. Breakfast is modest. A thick barley porridge with a bit of honey scraped from the bottom of a jar. The fire smoulders gently. Outside, the city is already bustling, full of carts and cursing, and the occasional donkey dispute. Today, your master declares, you're heading to the apothecary. You're not sick, at least not in any urgent way. But apparently he needs to restock on herbs, ointments, and something called Blessed Thistle, which sounds suspiciously like a medieval band name. You grab your cloak, offer a farewell nod to the still warm spot where Blanche had been, and follow your master into the streets. The Apothecary S shop is tucked between a fishmonger and a woman selling ribbons with questionable saints embroidered on them. It smells strongly of vinegar, lavender, and whatever was in that jar you knocked over when you accidentally leaned on the shelf. The shopkeeper doesn't say anything, just stares until you sheepishly step away. The interior is a wonder, cramped, shadowy, and full of oddities. Dried bundles of herbs dangle from the ceiling like green chandeliers. Glass jars of various shapes and dubious cleanliness line the walls, each containing something more unsettling than the last. Bits of bones, preserved frogs, powders that glitter faintly in the low light. Your master greets the apothecary like an old friend, or perhaps a rival. There's a strange energy between them, like two wizards sizing each other up. They launch into a discussion of tinctures, leeches, and whether a poultice made from ground larkspur is superior to one made from boiled nettles. You mostly try not to sneeze. As they debate, you notice something moving beneath the counter. You glance down and see a second cat, younger, sleeker, less battle-worn than Blanche. This one has a white nose and a tail that curls like a question mark. It peers at you with open curiosity. You reach out your hand. The cat considers it. Then it climbs up your arm like a ladder, plants itself on your shoulder, and begins purring like a contented wasp's nest. You freeze. The apothecary glances over and raises an eyebrow. She's taken to you, he says. That one don't sit with just anyone. Must be the scent of confusion. The apothecary, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers and a hat that looks like it was once part of a beehive, pours powders into parchment packets, muttering Latin words you have recognized from church. Play. You catch glimpses of the labels: comfrey, wormwood, dragon's blood. You strongly suspect the last one is just beet juice, but no one's willing to test it. Your master hands over a few coins and accepts a wrapped bundle of small vials and tied bundles. This should do, he says, sniffing the air with vague suspicion. Let's go before someone burns mugwort again. Gives me the dreams. Gently extract the cat from your shoulder, though she seems disappointed, and step back into the street. Outside, the smells are somehow even stronger. Fish, horse, damp wool, and the occasional sharp whiff of whatever's bubbling in someone's backyard cauldron. The breeze from the Thames does little to clear the air, but you're starting to get used to it, sort of. As you walk, your master offers one of the more useful lessons you've had in days. If your stomach aches, try peppermint. If your feet swell, soak them in vinegar. If your head's splitting, chew willow bark. And if you see a man selling powdered unicorn horn, smack him with your shoe. He's lying. You commit this wisdom to memory. You pass by a line of beggars sitting against the stone wall of a guild hall. Some wear rags, others are wrapped in wool cloaks, so tattered they look like they've been through wars. One woman wears a rosary made of knotted string and sings a hymn so softly it sounds like it's coming from a dream. You drop a small coin in her bowl. Your master sees and says nothing. Back at the workshop, the day resumes its usual rhythm. Leather is cut, glue is boiled, soles are stitched. You practice sharpening an awl on a piece of scrap until your hand cramps, and you have to sit down with a sigh that feels oddly adult. Later, while your master speaks with a customer about the relative merits of pigskin versus cowhide, you sneak away for a walk, not far, just around the block. And that's when you see it, a rat, bold as brass, fat as sin, sauntering down the alley like it owns the place. It pauses, sniffs the air, and locks eyes with you. There's a long moment of mutual recognition. You, with your 21st century instincts, screaming plague vector, and it with the medieval rat confidence of something that's only occasionally eaten by cats. And then Blanche appears, like a shadow summoned by sheer disdain. She leaps from a windowsill, lands silently behind the rat, and before you can even react, she's gone again, dragging her prize into the shadows with the grim efficiency of a professional. You stare at the empty space. Good girl, you murmur, and feel oddly reassured. That night, as the city slows again, firelight flickering, bells tolling far off, rain pattering lightly on the roof. You sit near the hearth with your master. Blanche is curled near the coals, purring softly. The packet of herbs sits nearby, smelling of mint and mystery. Your master speaks after a long silence. You're not useless, he says, without looking up from his stitching. Clumsy, aye, but not useless. You nod solemnly. Thank you. And somehow, in the quiet of a flickering workshop that feels like the highest praise anyone could ever hope for, the next morning begins, as mornings often do in 1348, with the sound of a chamber pot being dumped somewhere nearby, followed by a chorus of pigeons arguing on your roof. And then, rather suddenly, the distinct aroma of something you can only describe as bad decisions, steeped in vinegar and left out in the sun. You sit up, blinking at the dusty morning light. You slept better this time, which is either a sign that you're readjusting to life in medieval London, or that your body has simply given up protesting. The scratchy blanket now feels oddly familiar, like a cousin you don't like but have agreed to tolerate. You notice that your hands are developing calluses, and the persistent ache in your back has become just another voice in the growing choir of 14th century aches. You splash your face with cold water from a wooden basin, water that looks clean if you squint and don it. Think too hard about its source. Then join your master at the table, where this morning's delicacy is stale rye bread with a smear of lard, not butter. Lard, You chew slowly. It's a breakfast that builds character and possibly cholesterol. As you're finishing, your master sets down his mug of ale, because of course there's ale, and says, almost too casually, "We need to visit the tanner's yard." You pause mid. There are many things you've grown accustomed to over the last week. Unwashed feet, crowded streets, Blanche the murder cat, depositing gifts on the doorstep. But you've heard tales about the Tanner S yard, none of them good. Your master sees your expression and smirks faintly. It's time you saw where your precious leather comes from. Can't make boots from poetry, lad. You follow him out the door, heart heavy with dread, and lungs already preparing to protest. The tanner's yard lies near the outskirts of the city, close to the river, where the prevailing winds can, in theory, carry the smell away from more sensitive noses. This does not appear to be working. As you approach, the air thickens, not just with scent, but with an atmosphere of raw, biological intensity. The first thing that hits you is the stench. There's no preparing for it. It's not just one smell. It's a bouquet, a tapestry of the macabre, a medley of decomposing flesh, spoiled milk, wet dog, boiled onions, and something else you can only describe as existential regret. You try not to gag. You fail a little. Your master slaps you on the back. You get used to it. You do not believe him. The yard itself is a sprawling, muddy compound, surrounded by high wooden fences, as if the city were trying to quarantine the very idea of it. Inside, the work is constant. Men, and some women, move among great vats of liquid, scraping hides, soaking them, pounding them with wooden mallets. Their aprons are stiff with grime. Their hands, you notice, are stained a shade of brownish yellow that no amount of soap will likely ever remove. A man with one eye and a grin like a broken rake greets your master with a wave. "Come for the cow again, have you?" Your master nods. "Best cut you've got, no holes." The tanner, who introduces himself as Ellis, leads you to a row of fresh hides hanging from wooden beams like laundry on Judgment Day. He pulls one down and lays it across a bench, where your master inspects it with the seriousness of a jeweler evaluating diamonds. You try not to breathe through your nose. Bah, as they talk shop. Grain, thickness, how long it's been cured. You glance around, taking in the full reality of where leather comes from. There are hides everywhere, some raw, some halfway too usable, others looking suspiciously like they might still move. You spot a pile of hooves in one corner and a heap of entrails in another. A rat the size of a corgi scampers across the mud and disappears into a gap in the fence. Ellis notices your wide-eyed stare and grins. "Smells like hell, don't it? That's the dog dung." You blink. "The what?" He points to one of the vats. "We soak the hides in water, lime, and dog muck. Breaks down the hair and fat, makes the skin soft." You stare at him. He nods utterly without irony. "Best dungs from the butcher's dogs. They get the good scraps." You open your mouth, then close it, then reconsider your entire life. Ellis continues proudly. "After that we rinse M, beat M, Soak em in brains or pigeon droppings. Stretch em, dry em. Nothing's wasted. He gestures toward a pile of offcuts. We sell the trimmings to the glue maker. Waste not, want not. Your master claps you on the shoulder. Now you know why boots cost what they do. It's a sobering thought that something as simple as a shoe begins in this place of blood and stink and boiling urine. You've never appreciated footwear quite so much. Eventually, the transaction is complete. Your master hoists a wrapped bundle of hides onto your back, because of course that's your job now. And you begin the slow walk back to the shop. You smell like a tanner's apprentice, which is to say, you smell like a foot that lost a bet. Back at the workshop, your master sets the hides out to air, while you sit on the stoop, trying to forget the texture of a vat full of lime and manure. Blanche approaches, sniffs you once, and immediately turns away in disgust. That stings a little. Put you wash twice in the basin, scrubbing with a handful of ash and sand. It helps, barely, but the smell has a way of clinging like guilt or taxes. That evening, as the sun sets in a wash of smoky orange, you sit with your master and drink weak ale in silence. Your muscles ache. Your nose still twitches at phantom smells. But there's something else, too. A strange, weary pride. You've seen the mess behind the craft. You've smelled the sacrifice behind the softness. And tomorrow, when you run your fingers over the smooth grain of a finished boot, you'll know the road it took to get there. You lean back, exhaling. London stinks, but it's starting to feel like home. You wake the next morning with a surprisingly clear head, and the scent of tanning fumes still clings faintly to your hair and under your fingernails. A souvenir from yesterday's olfactory gauntlet. But the rising sun warms your straw-stuffed mattress, and for the first time since arriving in this strange new century, you feel something remarkably close to ... contentment. It helps that Blanche has chosen not to deposit a dead bird on your chest today, and you rise, stretch, wince at your back, and shuffle to the basin. The cold water feels less shocking now. Routine has a way of dulling discomfort. Breakfast is bread again, dry and dense, more brick than loaf. But today there's a bit of onion to go with it, chopped finely and sprinkled with salt, which is a luxury by recent standards. And then you chew it slowly, the sharpness waking you up more than any cup of modern coffee ever could. And there's no ale this morning, just thin, lukewarm water from the communal well. Pit tastes vaguely of moss and iron, but it's wet and it won't kill you, probably. After breakfast, your master announces that it's time for errands. Off to Cheapside, he says, buckling on a narrow leather belt that holds a pouch and a knife. Bring the coin purse, and don't stare at the beggars. You do as you're told. Cheapside, spelled cheap in some places, pronounced however your mouth happens to form it before. 10 o'clock in the morning is one of London's busiest and most storied market streets. It's the city's commercial spine, pulsing with voices, wares, smells, and the occasional flying cabbage. The name itself comes from the old English seep, meaning to buy, and that's exactly what you'll find here. Everything that can be bought, bartered, or haggled over, sold loudly by someone who insists that theirs is the best in all the city. You follow your master through a web of alleys and side streets, dodging carts and steaming piles of manure, until suddenly the world opens up, and there it is, Cheapside. You're not prepared. The noise hits you first, a tidal wave of clamor and chatter. Hawkers bellow their wares with the energy of opera singers on market day. Eels, fat and wriggling, fresh from the Thames, candles, beeswax or tallow. Your choice, apricots. Apricots from Kent, sweet as sin. Someone nearby is attempting to sell what appears to be a bucket of frogs. For what purpose, you're afraid to ask. Then there's the color. Cloaks of deep green, hoods dyed with madder root in brilliant red. Heaps of vegetables in earthy browns and greens. Baskets of dried flowers. Strings of bright blue glass beads. It's not the dull, muddy world people often imagine when they think of the past. Here, in the thick of trade, life is vivid. You pass stalls selling fresh bread, racks of smoked fish, bushels of turnips, bolts of woolen cloth, and even a merchant hawking genuine relics from the Holy Land, which, from the look of them, might actually be sheep knuckles carved to look like saints. A dog, enormous and shaggy, lumbers through the throng like he owns the place. You watch as he confidently relieves himself near a sack of flour, and the merchant barely flinches. Your master tugs your sleeve. Stay close, and mind your purse. Cut purses love a gawking apprentice. Prutchu nod, clutching the leather pouch like a holy relic. It contains the workshop's money for the day, and the thought of losing it makes your stomach tighten. First stop is the cordwainer's stall, not to be confused with a cobbler. As your master explained firmly, cordwainers make new shoes. Cobblers repair old ones. Different guilds, different rules. Don't mix them up. You find the cordwainer under a green awning, surrounded by baskets of shoe soles, rolls of leather, and trays of buckles. He and your master speak in the shorthand of tradesmen. Prices, delivery dates, specifications. You drift a little, ears wandering. Nearby, a tooth drawer is setting up for business. His sign reads, "Painless in 3 pulls or less." You aren't sure if that's a promise or a warning. A fiddler plays a sprightly tune while standing on an overturned barrel. No one seems to be paying him much attention, but he keeps playing with a kind of fierce, joyful stubbornness. A little farther on, a woman is selling hot pies from a tray slung round her neck. Pigeon and leek. Still warm, she calls. Your stomach growls. The scent is heavenly, savory and thick, like roasted meat wrapped in memories of better days. You glance at your master. He raises an eyebrow. 1 pie, but you carry the flour. Deal. The pie is wrapped in parchment and warm in your hands. You bite in and immediately burn your tongue, but it's worth it. The crust is flaky, the filling salty and rich. You'll probably regret this later, but for now, it's magic. Next stop is the ironmonger, a gruff man with soot-blackened hands who sells nails by weight and hinges by the handful. His stall is a chaotic pile of useful things, none of them labeled, all of them sharp. Your master orders a dozen hobnails and a new awl, and the man weighs them on brass scales that look older than England. Transaction complete. You heft a sack of flour onto your shoulder. It's heavier than expected and awkward to carry. Your back protests, but you hold steady. As you walk, your master points out various stalls and shops, naming guilds and trades as he goes. That one's a salter. That's a cooper, makes barrels. Over there's a chandler. He sells candles and soap, but don't mix those two up either. You nod, trying to memorize it all. But it's like drinking from a fire hose made of medieval trivia. And then, without warning, the bells of St. Marylebone begin to chime, deep, sonorous, and stately. Everyone pauses for a moment. Some cross themselves. Others simply glance skyward. Time flows differently in a city where the bells rule the hours. Your master checks the sky. Nearly noon. Let's be heading back. The walk home is slower, heavier now, with goods and aching muscles. The market noise fades behind you, replaced by the clatter of carts, the distant shouts of apprentices, and the ever-present squabbling of pigeons on rooftops. As you turn down your own street, something shifts in your chest, and you recognize the houses. The smell of your workshop, and even Blanche, lurking like a shadow with whiskers, feels familiar. You're no longer a tourist in time, because you're becoming a part of it.